Hello everyone, this is Luke the Apostate, and this is our next episode of The Christian Experience, where I talk about the experience of Christians and how it is uncomfortably like that of the abuse victim. This episode is about how the Christian God is described as having an impoverished self. I am reading from Nina Brown's Children of the Self-Absorbed, where she describes traits of the self-absorbed parent. On page 6, she says, "The behaviors that signal the impoverished self includes constantly decrying how she is deprived, left out, and minimized, even when there is no evidence to support this perspective. She can be self-deprecating, but will become angry or hurt if others agree. She uses put-downs of herself in an effort to get others to disagree." In the Old Testament, the nation of Israel is constantly described either as ignoring God and running around like a prostitute or chasing after prostitutes, or as the nation of God standing in for God and being persecuted by others. Israel is described as ignoring God, or conversely, God being deprived, left out, and minimized all over the Old Testament. Constantly, the God of the Bible is described as whining about how God's special people that God chose is not paying enough attention to God. If this were describing high school youths, it would be creepy stalker behavior. When Israel is not being described as the unfaithful lover, it is described as being persecuted. For example, in the Babylonian exile in Jeremiah chapters 20 to 22. In the New Testament, especially in the books of Luke and Acts, the Christian church, God's new chosen people, is emphatically described as persecuted. Major figures in the church are flogged, driven out of cities, and stoned. One of the most famous passages in the North American church is in Acts chapter 7, verses 54 to 60, the stoning of Stephen. This is taught to children today in the church and repeated to adults to teach Christians an identity as a persecuted and suffering minority because they are God's people, which translates to God being a persecuted and suffering minority, even when Christians represent the majority of the population in an area. And finally, the self-deprecation of God reaches its height when, according to contemporary Christian theology, God sends himself to die, to be mocked and tortured and killed. He is described in the New Testament as having no reputation, as being a servant, as being one who serves, as one who comes to give his life, as the lowest sort of person that there is. And this sort of theme is constantly a refrain in North American churches. And yet, to agree with this, to say that Christ wasn't all that special, is to commit the worst possible sin that the Christian church can conceive of. And further, the horrific death of Christ in the Bible is rewarded at the end when the character of Christ is described as having kings worshiping, falling down, and declaring him worthy of all honor. The Christian experience is one that is very much like a child being raised by an abusive parent with an impoverished self who talks themselves down in order to be talked up. I hope you have found this video useful. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. This has been Luke the Apostate, and please be kind to one another.